Well, good morning, Mr. Khatari, Mr. Pal, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, Dr. Ramachandran, Mr. Bhatia, and Dr. Kurt. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, can I say what an honour it is for me to be at this conference. Now, this is not the done thing, and I'm probably going to break with protocol by disagreeing with the guest of honour, with your distinguished Mr. Gopalakrishnan. He said that the most vilified industry in the world was the chemical industry. Sir, I disagree. It's politicians, probably closely followed by bankers. Ladies and gentlemen, there was no need to applaud that. You don't have to agree with me with regards to that. I was going to say that I've had such a lovely time in India and you've made me feel so welcome. Applauding the fact that the politicians are the most vilified people in the world maybe makes me think again. I've had a wonderful time in India. This is my first time here and it's just been an absolute joy. The warmth and generosity I've experienced has left a real deep impression on me. And it's a real privilege, as I said earlier, to be able to address the conference. Now in its 7th year, the India Chemical Industry Conference goes from strength to strength, seen as a vital part of the global chemical industry landscape and cementing India's place in the world, especially when it comes to the chemical industry. Now, although, ladies and gentlemen, this is my first time in India, links between my constituency of Hartlepool and India go back much, much further. The centrepiece of my town's marina, I have a constituency on the northeast coast of England. In the marina is HMS Trincomalee, the oldest British warship afloat. It was built 200 years ago in this very city from Indian teak made by the Wadia family. Can I just say to you, ladies and gentlemen, let me report how it's doing. We're looking after it very well. I think the brochure explaining and outlining this conference is most relevant. It states that change is the only constant. It refers to the fact that change, business complexity and dynamics have now taken on a whole new meaning in the 21st century. As we've heard from previous speakers, the world's population will rise to 9 billion by 2050, and 70% of that new global population will be in cities. For the first time, the majority of people will live in urban areas rather than rural areas for the first time in human history. The world economy will double in size in little over a dozen years, unleashing, hopefully, an unprecedented wave of prosperity and rising living standards for billions of people. But as we know, these forces and trends are also placing immense pressure on resources like energy, food and water, and on the environment. I think we all agree that the only way that we can enjoy rising living standards for billions while preserving our planet is by embracing the strengths and opportunities of chemistry and the chemical industry. Chemistry and the process of using that chemistry in a commercial manner will extend the life of materials and products. It will reduce their carbon footprint. It will enable more reuse and recycling of critical products. It will reduce the energy use of transportation, of buildings, and of domestic and industrial produce. Now, those businesses and those countries that can innovate, that can address those challenges, are those businesses and countries that will succeed in the modern 21st century economy. How can the chemical and process industries in India and in the UK respond to these challenges? India is poised for even more change. The country has emerged as a global power. You've emerged from the global recession, certainly from UK eyes, in a resilient manner. A young population gives further astonishing scope for growth. As a politician, I'm somewhat interested in general elections, and in little over a month's time, India will have a general election. It will be the biggest election and exercise in true parliamentary democratic engagement in human history. Given the size, the scale and the significance of India, the whole world will be taking an interest. The Indian chemical industry is poised for the next wave of exciting growth, looking at something like 10 to 12% a year for the foreseeable future. But chemistry and the chemical industries is also important for the UK. Actually, the chemicals and process industries are at the very heart. They are the foundation of the UK's manufacturing capability. Chemistry-using industries currently operate something like $1 trillion of sales. We have a number of particular strengths: an abundance of natural gas, a potential for unconventional gas, a world-class science and innovation base, and skills in difficult and complex process technologies. We're particularly strong in my own area, the northeast of England. We have the largest concentration of chemical engineering companies in Western Europe. More than 1,400 companies in the northeast are either directly involved or in the supply chain, generating £26 billion of annual sales, something like £12 billion of exports. The ambition of the Northeast Process Industry Cluster, NEPIC, which I share this ambition, is to build on this powerful industrial base with a first-class infrastructure to make the Northeast one of the most innovative, competitive and successful regions in Europe for chemistry-related industries. I have been told, ladies and gentlemen, from Stan Higgins, the Chief Executive Officer of NEPIC, the Northeast Process Industries Cluster, that it's too short for me to do a presentation, but I have to tell you that all the presentation and information about the strengths and comparative advantages and possibilities and opportunities from the Northeast are available in your pens. There is a memory stick that is available that has all the presentations there. As I said, as a politician, I'm somewhat interested in general elections, and the UK has a general election in 429 days' time. I'm counting down. It's not as big as India's. I'm currently the opposition spokesman for industry, but in 429 days' time, I want to be the government minister for industry. I want to pursue an industrial strategy with government working closely with industry that identifies our comparative advantages and considers, frankly, how we in the UK will pay our way in the world in the next 20 or 30 years. I want this approach to transcend petty party politics and span several parliaments. I want to promote long-term policy certainty, clarity and stability, to enable investors to have long-term confidence and to provide a platform for business to grow and thrive in the UK for many years to come. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, you've been so kind to me in India. But one of the things that I will take away is how many things that we share. We share an upcoming general election. We have shared experiences in history. We have a shared culture and shared governance and legal systems. We share a love of cricket, although I think you're doing rather more better than we are in England when it comes to cricket. But speaking to you over the last few days, what has really struck me, and we've heard it today from the great speakers that we have heard from, is how we have shared issues in both countries in the chemical industry. A question of access to feedstocks, the ability to attract young people into the industry, the perception of the industry, whether it's negative or positive, the need for innovation, rising energy prices. And this conference, I would suggest, is an excellent way of sharing good practice and providing shared responses to these challenges. But actually, ladies and gentlemen, it's more profound than just having shared issues. What I've seen in the past week is that we've got a shared ambition for the future, A shared ambition based upon mutual trust and respect between the UK and India. A wish to have a close, long-term partnership. Not purely a business transaction lasting something like 3 months, but a deep and enduring partnership that will grow, prosper and thrive over many decades. Meaning that both India and British firms can trade, can invest, and ultimately create wealth, prosperity, and rising living standards for our populations. There's so much we can achieve with that long-term partnership and a shared vision. Even though I would suggest that our history goes back many, many years, I feel that we're only at the start of a new and exciting phase. I'm keen, ladies and gentlemen, to work with you and do all I can to foster and embed that strong long-term partnership to make sure that we can have wealth and prosperity for our populations. It's a real honour to be here. It's a real honour to be at the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wright. That was indeed a very, very warm address. I'm going to now request Mr. H.S. Karangle, Director General of ICC, to announce the ICC Aditya Birla Awards for the Best Responsible Care Committed Company for the year 2012.
Dignitaries on dais and friends. ICC Awards for the year 2012 in different categories like energy, water management, innovation were presented during ICC Award function held on 26 September 2013. However, selection process of ICC Aditya Birla Award for Best Responsible Care Committed Company could not be completed in time. Hence, it was decided to give this award during the 7th Annual India Chemical Industry Outlook Conference, that is today's conference. This award is sponsored by Aditya Birla Group, and this is the 8th year ICC is presenting the award, which includes a plaque, citation, and cash award of ₹1 lakh. My president has already announced, but I take privilege to announce once again that I am extremely happy to announce ICC Aditya Birla Award for Best Responsible Care Committed Company for the year 2012, and the winner is BASF India Limited. I heartily congratulate BASF for their achievement, and now I hand over to Nidhi to continue the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Karangle, sir. Mr. Karangle and his team are the guiding force for ICC to arrange all the platforms for us. We thank you very much, sir. I'm going to now request Mr. Indrajit Pal, Dr. Hans-Jürgen Kotte, and Mr. Yogesh Kothari to please step forward on the dais to hand over the award and the plaques. I'm going to request Dr. Raman Ramachandran to please also step forward, and his team members, Ms. Ashima Sushil Chandra, Mr. Alvin Krastro, and Captain Dinesh Desai to please join him on the dais. Shri Indrajit Pal shall now bestow the award plaque onto the team. Ladies and gentlemen, an applause. Thank you, sir. I'm going to now request Dr. Hans-Jürgen Kotte to hand over the citation to the team, please. Aditya Birla Award for the Best Responsible Care Committed Company for the year 2010 conferred on BASF India Limited. BASF in India is having a legacy of over 100 years. Today, 13 out of the 14 global businesses maintain a presence in the country. In 2030, BASF had sales of 7,900 crores with 2,200 employees working across 8 production sites. And now I'm going to request for Mr. Yogesh M. Kothari to hand over the check to the team, please. Very many congratulations. A truly deserved award. And now I'm going to request for Mr. Kothari to please hand over the mementos to our speakers of the inaugural session. Mr. Indrajit Pal, Secretary, DCPC. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, Director, Tata Sons. Mr. Ian Wright, Member of UK Parliament. Thank you, Yogesh sir. I'm going to now request Mr. Rakesh Bhartia, Vice President ICC, to hand over Dr. Raman Ramachandran. His memento, please. Dr. Hans-Jürgen Kote. Dr. Kote is also Solvay's Corporate Government for Public Affairs Department. I think that brings us to the end of the inaugural session. Thank you, speakers. It was a truly enlightening session and sets the trend for the rest of the 2 days to follow. Before we break for the coffee and tea break, I think we do deserve it now. We're going to request Mr. Bhartia to please give the vote of thanks, the customary vote of thanks.
I think I was planning to thank Nidhi for sparing me this whole ordeal of giving the vote of thanks. Because every time that I see my name, I wonder, why is it that as the Vice President, I need to give the vote of thanks? I'm the youngest. I love to look younger and feel younger. And I'm the shortest in terms of stature. When I look at the people on the dais here, that how on earth can I be expected to give a vote of thanks to these people sitting here? But I'll still go ahead. I'll start with Mr. Wright. I think it's an Indian custom that we treat our guests as privileged. So thank you, Mr. Wright, for having taken the time and flown all the way and attended this conference. But I would also like to thank Mr. Wright for being brutally honest. I think he's possibly the only one who's spoken honestly. I think many of us tend to hide our feelings, but possibly he expressed it most honestly. And I can also assure him that if a UK business invests in India, if they invest in innovation in India, if they invest in skills in India, 200 years later, that whole investment of their business, innovation, and skill would be as safe. So it's not only the ship that we sent from here that was safe, but I can assure you we'll reciprocate with all the warmth and grace. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, I think I keep looking for commonalities, that what is it that I have which can make me reach where he is. And I start with the initial. He's Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan, I'm Rakesh Bhartia. I feel great. Then he played tennis. I used to play badminton in the same gym. I decided not to play tennis because I knew someday he's going to fracture his hands. So I said, no, badminton is far better. Then I felt very pleased when I saw his brief resume that he studied in St. David's in Kolkata. I've done the same. So I now realize that I'm going to reach where he has over a period of time. It's taken him possibly 40 years. It may take me 60 years. But with the advancement in chemistry, I'm fairly certain I'll live much longer and I'll work much longer than many of us here. So, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, thank you very much. It was possibly one of the most insightful addresses or speeches that at least I've ever heard. Dr. Ramachandran, somebody somewhere mentioned to me that when we speak of chemistry, possibly the only company that strikes our imagination is BASF. Apparently in Germany, I think you are proud. You feel proud when you say that you work for BASF. And the very fact that Dr. Ramachandran has chosen to come back to India after such a long stint, I guess exactly positions India in the global chemical industry. I think it goes to show that it is a sunrise industry, And the sun is going to rise sooner rather than later. The very fact that we have somebody like him now sitting in BSF in India demonstrates the potential or the opportunity that the chemical industry has in India. So thank you very much once again. Then we have Dr. Pal. I always feel scared to go and attend any meeting with Dr. Pal. And it's not for any other reason, not that he's daunting or he's frightful. He's possibly among the most accessible senior bureaucrats that you can come across. I think the challenge is, because he has a background in chemistry, which I don't, I'm dead sure that 3 out of his 5 questions I'll not be able to answer. So I'll have to look here and there. I always look for people. I always look for Hari Haran in Delhi saying, Hari, why don't you come along for a meeting with him? Because you can take care of the chemistry-related questions. I can take care of the rest. He's possibly, like I said, one of the most accessible bureaucrats. And he knows chemistry and been extremely supportive of the industry. And there is no function where if you were to send an invite to him, he would say no. He'll make it sure that he's there, and he'll grace the occasion with his presence. Thank you, Dr. Pal. I think in terms of our importance to responsible care, that itself is reflected by the fact that we have Dr. Kurgan here, and we have sessions on responsible care later, and I'll possibly end by saying, but before that, Yogesh Bhai is always the Bhishma Pitama of the Indian chemical industry. I think his words of wisdom are always are available, will always be needed. Thank you very much. Before I convey my final concluding vote of thanks, I would need to thank Mr. Parthasarthi. Without his indomitable spirit, I don't think we could have built a program which is as comprehensive, as knowledgeable. We need to thank NEPIC and Frost & Sullivan, the various sponsors, the various panel speakers, the various delegates to the conference, and last but not the least, because I run the risk of losing my vice presidentship if I don't thank Mr. Karangle and his team. Without their support, without their involvement, without their commitment, this conference couldn't have been a success. What I would like to assure everybody sitting here, be it the policymakers, be it the business heads, we as a chemical industry in India are responsible, which is reflected by our commitment to responsible care. We will make sure that the globe remains nicer. That's reflected in the form of our commitment to Project Nicer Globe. And we would change the perception. And one of the industry associations, which is CII, has already undertaken a comprehensive perception change program. So maybe 2 years from now or 3 years from now, when we meet again, you will find an industry which is catching the opportunity or the potential that it deserves, and separately, it's not going to be the most vilified industry in any BSF survey which they undertake 2 years, 3 years later. Thank you, everybody, and wish you a great days ahead.
Rakesh never thanks me, and that mistake that I did was not inadvertent. I think we are all going to work together, and hopefully when we go back to our homes, our parents should start feeling proud that what industry we are working in. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take our first tea and coffee break. Request you to be back by 11:40 so that we can end the day in time. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the break. And I would request everyone to please take their places in the hall. Chairman for the first session for the conference, Dr. Arup Basu, is here with us, and I'm going to now request him to bring his speakers to the dais. Mr. S.J. Stilliard, Vice President and Managing Director, Huntsman International. Mr. Vishnu Shankaran, Associate Director and Head Chemicals, Frost & Sullivan. Dr. S. Hariharan, Joint Managing Director, Soralis Chemtech. Mr. Vipul S. Shah, President, CEO and Chairman, Dow Chemicals. And Mr. John Lear, Senior Business Investment Manager, Tees Valley Unlimited. I think on the request of the speakers, I'll let the bios be on the projector and not read them aloud. They're also in the books that are in your bags. And I don't think these illuminaries need any introduction. we are going to begin session 1 on global chemical industry and cross-border trade relationships. And I'm going to hand over to Dr. Arup Basu, President, Tata Chemicals, to lead the session, please. Over to you, sir.
Can we have one last bell for people who are still sorting out their hydrodynamic balance? Please. Thank you. Welcome all to the first session. It's a very good title, given where we are headed this year in India. Global chemical industry and cross-border trade relationships and convergence. I am actually a believer of Frederick Bastiat's old quote that if goods don't cross borders, troops do, or something to that effect. And so I think it's very appropriate we have this. Like a good conference participant, now that I have the mic, I'm very reluctant to hand it over to anybody else. But I think we have an outstanding set of speakers, so without any further ado, let me just start off by inviting Mr. Stilliard, Vice President and Managing Director, Huntsman, one of the leaders in specialty chemicals area. He'll speak on current status of Indian chemical industry and potential for its growth in India and also in the world market. So, Mr. Stilliard, over to you. I have been given a bell, which I do not plan to use after 20 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
It's all over to you.
So, good morning, everybody. I bet you all would have loved to have been given a very narrow topic to speak on, and you can see how narrow my topic is. I think it's probably about as broad as you could imagine. So, what I'm going to try to do is just give you some of my thoughts about what it is to be involved in India chemical industry, particularly from the standpoint of a multinational. So let me see if the system works. So a little bit of a view on what's happening around the world. I want particularly to ask you to help me do my job, because I'm a very selfish person. And a big part of my job is to help the management of Huntsman sitting in the US understand why India should be an attractive spot for investment. I think it should be. I have this wonderful optimism about how India can develop over the next 50 years, but that isn't always shared by those sitting a long way away. So I want to give you some insight into some of the factors that play a part in that. Maybe a little bit on what's missing and some areas where I think that the group in this room can work together even more effectively to develop that attractiveness option. So, this is a Huntsman slide. Now, I know there's temptation in these events to spend the whole time talking about your company, but this is my only Huntsman slide. The only point about this is that Huntsman has manufacturing operations in many, many countries, and like all other companies, has a limited amount of capital. And it has options about the segment and the geography into which that new capital is placed. So India has to fight its corner pretty strongly against some fast-developing competition. And that's just internal in Huntsman, let alone in the external market. So India sitting there, for Huntsman it's a substantial business, but it doesn't do anything unless it's really earned the right for new capital. So I don't know if you can read that from the back, but these are just some of the trends which I think are going to play a role in the next 10, 20 years. And these are true for all of the companies in this room, and play a part when the banker in each of our organisations has to start thinking about placing its bets where the reward will be at the greatest and most predictable level. This is all in the pack, so you can have a chance of reading that later. One of the things that's clearly changed substantially in recent years is the development of shale gas and the economics of feedstock on a global basis. And it's not so easy for me, and I hope that, again, I can get some guidance from yourselves at how to place the India feedstock competitiveness when we're talking about the relationship between India and the rest of the world and the other options which companies have. So it is a changing situation. We wouldn't have seen this chart 10 years back. We probably wouldn't have seen it 5 years back. So how is that going to affect the positioning of company investment in India and elsewhere? This next chart, which I've pinched from Booz the Analyst, is how major national companies are moving up the league table in the chemical industry. We've still got the heavyweights, the global heavyweights there, but you see the introduction into the Premier League of companies like Sinopec, Sabic, and LG Chem. We call these in Huntsman, we call these national champions. And I think my perception of the behaviour of the national champions in India, the Reliance, the Tata, the Aditya Birla, etc., is to develop their competitive position in upstream market, and they'll continue to do that very well. But I'm not sure I'm seeing their appetite for moving downstream into specialty. And I think that's where I see the opportunity for foreign investment in India to build on the position developed by the national champions, who may enter those markets downstream through acquisition of technology from the international specialty players, but I don't see those companies per se developing that position. So the question mark and the potential, I think, for companies like Huntsman and many others represented here is to somehow partner, collaborate, work with the national champions to develop a strong platform of cost, technology, logistic to enable competitive development of downstream specialty chems such that domestic production in India looks attractive versus import. Because of the development of the shale gas industry and because of existing capacity in, for example, in Huntsman in Texas, there's always a temptation to build additional capacity in that domestic situation because the incremental capital will be substantially lower, and then say, okay, well, we'll build and invest in supply chain into emerging markets to take advantage of that low cost base in the feedstock in the home country. And for the people who work the spreadsheets, sometimes the IRR returns can be much more attractive on the spreadsheet by doing that home-based investment, because the return comes more quickly and the capital may appear to be at a lower level. So again, that's the argument which we, representing the emerging market economies, have to fight against. And the more ammunition we have to do that, the better. So I like this chart. This is one of those charts which sets capacity and unit cost of production on an ordered basis. So the blue line says what the cost curve was, this is for ethylene, in 2005, and then how A, capacity in absolute terms has developed, and B, where the low-cost players have come into play through investment and changes in the basic feedstock. So, first of all, to note, capacity has increased very strongly in a relatively short period, but the balance of the low-cost people, the Middle East is still there as the lowest cost, but US has come in and moved very much to the left of this chart. So China slips back, other areas also slip back. So if you've got that advantage creeping in terms of ethylene, which of course is a key feedstock, the great temptation is to say, okay, well, why don't I build my downstream capacity near my upstream low-cost feedstock rather than nearer the market? And emerging markets can just take our, if you like, our excess into their markets. And that used to be the case donkey's years ago. But I think as those of us who work in emerging markets realise how difficult it is to actually sustain a customer position if you're living off a 10,000-mile supply chain. So this is where the spreadsheet has to be better informed to give a better economic and business decision. So that's talking about chemistry. What about other things that people look at when they're thinking about India and investment? Well, the next couple of slides are pretty depressing, but they're a different topic. I'm sure some of you will have seen this sort of analysis before, but this outfit, Transparency International, produce this assessment of corruption by country. And these are the sort of reports which are read on a regular basis in the boardrooms of Houston. So here we have the league table. This is the first page of the league table, which runs to about number 9. Anyway, so it's a long way down. So we don't see India on the first page. We see India on the second page with a score of 36, and that's its equal with the likes of Colombia and the Philippines. And in terms of Asia, here we go, well down the list. And that's just a general, that just creates a generally unfavourable image of India, and not something we specifically can do much about in this room, but I think individual companies in chemical industry do have a role to play in their own organisations to lift the perception. Having worked in China for quite a few years before I came via Singapore to here, I often get asked, you know, what's the difference between the culture in India versus China, and is corruption of a different level or a different profile? And I have to say, well, I really don't know, but my responsibility is to try to create a culture in Huntsman which is the same as the culture in Huntsman in Mexico or in Germany. And whatever culture you're dealing with, you must bring to the table the values and the merits which you want to see, not those which may or may not prevail in your geography, because we all know that India is a country of 1,000, if not a billion cultures. So there isn't any single culture. We have to build our own culture. What do we want to achieve in the business situation, and then work towards them. But it is an issue that I have to deal with. Then there's the general question of, is India going to perk up? Are we going to see the growth? Is the demographic dividend real? Or is it just an invention of economists? And here we've got Citigroup's outlook. Seems to me that the general perception is that things should perk up second half of this year, and that we have the opportunity, if the governance is moving in the right direction, to see a more optimistic growth outlook 2015, 2016, which again will reinforce the argument about being close to market here in terms of investment, and move on. I have some further slides here, but we'll flip through to investment, and this is the good analysis of capital investment in India by source over the last few years. And you see FDI, which is this one here, is not insignificant. There's been some reasonable levels of FDI in India in the last 4 or 5 years, in the sort of $20 million range, sorry, 20 billion. But we need to get to the level which China enjoys of the 80 to 100 billion range. And all the things I've talked about, the transparency, the closest to market, the level of certainty in the market, needs to be allied to some political intervention, I think, to make business a little bit easier to achieve, to make sure that that 20 billion becomes near triple digit in the next 4 or 5 years. So, I've had the privilege on 2 or 3 occasions in the last 12 months to listen to a fellow called Dr. Sharma, who many of you will know. He is the all-encompassing guru of Indian chemical industry. And I just wrote down a few of the things. It doesn't really matter what these are, but these are chemistries which India needs to have to fill the jigsaw. We've got upstream, we've got some nice pharmaceutical fine chemicals, but there's a number of chemistries in the middle which don't exist. And I think this is the opportunity for that spike in foreign direct investment, which can then lead the whole chain to become more integrated. And I think my message, if anything, is how do we get better? How do we get the Indian chemical industry moving forward into a different league? The key to it is integration, because we have, as I say, some big hitters from the national champions. We have a fragmented and somewhat disorganized sector. We don't make the most of integration, and to me, chemistry thrives on integration. Things going through pipes, so much better than going on the back of an 8-ton truck down India's roads. So I would really take a lot of time to support the work that the ICC has already kicked off in thinking about how we can integrate for mutual benefit. I mean, I know we all have our own P&Ls and balance sheet to demonstrate and to improve, but the real step forward for India chemical industry, from my perspective, will come from the establishment of several hubs, clusters, whereby we can safely and cost effectively move our feedstock through conversion processes which don't rely on individual company investment, but can be brought together to make sure that the investment is leveraged across all those items. Responsible care is at the heart of that and needs to be supported. And I think the notion that we've got established with GPCB, that companies that carry the responsible care badge can have a slightly preferential status, is something that we can continue to develop. Because I think a responsibility for the responsible companies is to make sure that we are selective in the way we deal with suppliers and customers also on a responsible basis. So if we continue, and I'm not saying people in this room do that, but if we continue to work with and support cowboys in this industry, that will be to our detriment. I think we have a collective responsibility to lift performance and attention to responsible care right across the board. And again, that will help us prepare a better statement of intent for investment against the other options. Overall, I am very positive. I wouldn't be standing here in this room if I wasn't feeling that we're on the right track. But we do have to recognise the elephant in the corner, which is low-cost feedstock elsewhere in the world. We have to promote our own integrity and shape our offering such that the demographic dividend, whatever form it comes, we capture with alacrity and intelligence. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Mr. Stilliard. That's a good compilation of really the challenges that people face in this country. And it's good that you started with options, because I think companies even in India realize that the option of options exists everywhere. And you have a fairly flat world when it comes to putting your establishments. In terms of resource discontinuities, I think if we start thinking of the Middle East as middle and remove the word East, then the penny might drop that we need to perhaps reorient the way we look at natural resource sourcing points and drive the kind of innovations and downstream product growth areas for countries like India. And despite the issues around corruption, and sometimes I wonder if Transparency International or someone reputed like them can be given a mandate that instead of countries, can you make a list of street addresses? And maybe in that Wall Street might come far high up in the sort of corruption index. But on a serious note, the UK Bribery Act, for example, is a great piece of legislation. And companies like ours are looking at it, those who have businesses in the UK. There are solutions to creating, at least cleaning your own island or cleaning your own companies. And when these coalesce, you get a larger and larger canvas where the rules are transparent and equal for all. And the attraction for India, which will not go away, is around being closer to the customer. Because we have a whole bunch of current and future customers. And those of you who are in the B2B space, which most of you are, realize that the one community none of us particularly have a great affection for is the purchase manager. And the advantage with having a whole bunch of consumers is that you have hedged your purchase manager risk from, say, if you have 20 customers or 50 customers or 100 customers to millions of purchase managers. And that's a very good hedging strategy if you're growing your enterprise. Dr. Sharma's list of 17 is there with all of us. It's been there for a long time, and many of the attractions are downstream. So you go to middle, pick up your assets which need size and scale, and then you come down to your millions of purchase managers and try and do some clever things. So that takes me to my next speaker, Mr. Vishnu Shankaran. He is the Frost & Sullivan Associate Director and Head Chemicals for Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia, my apologies. And he'll speak on the Middle East chemical industry, which is fairly valid for all of us. Mr. Shankaran.
Thank you, Dr. Basu. And thanks, Nidhi, for the earlier comment you made on not reading out resumes, bios. I'm probably the youngest in this elite audience out here, and I wasn't aware that a slightly longish, unwantedly longish resume of mine that was printed on the delegate kit, so I'm glad that wasn't read aloud. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a pleasure and privilege for me to be here amidst this elite gathering of the Indian chemical industry. I was really looking forward to being a part of this event. I really like the comment that Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan made this morning about this industry kind of enriching human happiness. I mean, I'm very passionate about this industry. I like that. I've even seen this in an earlier presentation that some senior official from Dow had made, where they were referring to work that they do in terms of enriching the human element, or HU, and they had put it alongside the various elements of the periodic table. And I thought that kind of was a very nice way of portraying it. All right, that said, so I'm not based in India. I live in Dubai, but I travel very often to India in terms of the work we do with the clients here. Now, the reason I mentioned this is I was on a flight last night. I was boarding the flight from Dubai, and between the boarding gate, the hall, the boarding waiting area, to when I boarded the flight and actually sat in my seat, I came across three gentlemen. The gentleman who was sitting next to me in the hall, the gentleman who was next to me when we were going on the aero bridge, and to the final seat that I came and sat. They were all three different gentlemen from three different European countries who were flying to Mumbai to have some business with the chemical industry. And the gentleman who eventually ended up sitting next to me is right here attending a conference on coatings, which I believe is happening in the Mumbai Exhibition Center. I mean, I thought that was a pretty nice precursor. It was almost like a good omen that I'm flying here to talk about the Middle East chemical industry, and here are three different guys from Europe coming to increase business for their companies with the chemical industry. And they were so gung-ho about what they expected out of the industry, what they wanted to do with the industry, that I thought was a nice omen. So on that note, clearly there's one message. There's a lot of interest from Europe on the Indian chemical industry. It was also shared by the gentleman earlier in the morning session. What I'm going to be doing is talking about opportunities in the Middle East chemical industry. I mean, having based there and to see the kind of incredible work that's happening there, attracting investments, that's something that I really wanted to share. So we'll be talking about, I'll just give a brief overview of the Middle East economy, and there's a reason for me to do this. I'm sure all of us have read about GDP and growth everywhere, but there's a reason for me to do that. And then I'll go talk about what is Middle East's contribution to the chemical industry today, which are the major products that were historically there in Middle East and what's happening now, what kind of investments and diversification plans are in place, what can we do about it, what are some of the mega trends? Mr. Stilian mentioned about some mega trends. Specifically, what are those mega trends that are happening in the Middle East chemical industry, and how can we tap into those? And finally, some key conclusion points. All right. If you look at this chart, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, when I say Middle East, I mean the 6 GCC countries and a few non-GCC nations, including Iran and Iraq and Lebanon and Jordan and so on. I haven't included Africa here. I'm only including Middle East. And I've taken a 10-year time frame between 2011 and 2020. If you see this on the bar charts on the first half of the graph, you see the contribution of the oil to GDP and contribution of non-oil businesses to GDP. And non-oil is the blue part there. You see the blue is gradually increasing. In almost all countries except Iraq, where oil is contributing a large chunk of the GDP by 2020. Now, the bottom half of this graph here, right here, tells you that, say, Saudi Arabia, 53% is the contribution of oil today, and that's decreasing to about 35% by 2020. And similarly, in all other regions except Iraq, where there's an increase to about 94%. Now, what does this tell us? I mean, this tells us there's an incremental amount of diversification that's happening in these countries. Diversification along the petrochemical value chain, specialty chemicals, along the metals value chain, and not just base oil and gas. And I can feel it. Being based there, I can really feel it. And companies have this appetite for getting into different product segments that they never were in for so many decades. So clearly it's a fast-growing economy, and this just shows how much non-oil contribution to GDP is going to increase over the next 10 years.